Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Stress, tension, doubts, lack of clarity, overthinking. Okay. This is the human condition. In the society as our societies have become, I am sure that hundreds of years ago, and even thousands and tens of thousands of years ago, there was also stress and tension and lack of clarity and the games in the mind, but I believe that it was a lot less. People's duties and people's roles were really very clear. What they were expected to do was very clear. The possibilities open to them were very few. The stress tended to be matters of putting food on the table. If you go back far enough, back to tribal living, protecting yourself from the animals, protecting yourself from warring tribes, protecting from fevers that come. Today what's happened, and the reason that this is now what you've said is an epidemic. If we go around, I would be shocked if there were anyone here who wasn't presently or within the last very few days, weeks, months, suffering from stress, tension, lack of clarity, overthinking. This has become an absolute epidemic, and I really believe it's because the way that our societies are today, the benefit, the beauty of it is you can do anything. The roles, the chains in many ways that bound our ancestors not even that long ago, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they pretty much knew what they had to do. There was a specific role that they played. The jobs that they were able to get, that they were able to dream of, where they were able to go, what they were able to achieve, was really very prescribed. These days, it's a wonderful blessing. Everything has opened up. It doesn't matter in many cases what your parents did. Doesn't even matter in most parts of the world, thankfully, whether you're a man or a woman. Doesn't matter what you have to begin with. The world is now at our fingertips. It's an incredible time in history where, when you just look in India, for example, a boy who grew up selling tea on train platforms has become the prime minister. I mean, if you need any more evidence of what is happening in our world and the amazingness of it, there it is. The problem, though, that comes from it is without roles, without those duties very specifically prescribed, it's hard to know what to do. But along with that lack of clarity of just what to do, which really should be just a beautiful confusion. I mean, it should be the equivalent of walking into a restaurant where everything you love to eat is there. Well, you've only got one stomach. It can only take in a certain amount of food. But it's a beautiful predicament to be in because you love everything. Everything is open to you. You know that whatever you eat, you're going to be super happy. It should be that type of predicament. Wow, I have so many opportunities, so many possibilities. I could do this, I could do that, I could live here, I could live there, I could study this. But the reason that it becomes not a happy predicament, not like being in a restaurant full of all your favorite food, is because along with the opening of society and culture is also a new type of pressure, an identification pressure that says who you are is based on what you do. You walk into the restaurant, nobody says who you are is based on whether you eat the chocolate chip cookies or chocolate cake or vanilla ice cream for dessert. But what you choose out of this buffet of paths, of careers, of places to live, of life journeys, determines not just what you do, it determines who you are. And this is the predicament we're in. It shouldn't determine who you are. But with society and culture now identifying us, judging us, labeling us, creating a world in which we identify ourselves based on what we do. That's where the pressure comes. Then it's not simply a matter of, oh, I started to do this job. I thought I was going to love it. I didn't love it. I'm going to start something new. Like I started the chocolate cake, wasn't so good, decided on the vanilla ice cream instead. Instead of being an easy, joy-filled, possibility-open choice, this is now your identity you're carving. And that's why it has become so stressful. It's not just you practice medicine. You are the doctor. And along with being the doctor, you are the successful one, the rich one, the one people look up to in the community. That's a role. Alternatively, you couldn't make it through biology class, no matter how much your father wanted you to be the doctor. Biology just wasn't your strong suit. You could not remember all of those different parts of the cell. Instead of becoming a doctor, you've gotten a job in a company, kind of low level. Okay, well, you're just a clerk. You're going to feel down. People, when they talk to you, will put you in that box. That box will create a box within you. Your parents begin it. Become a doctor. Dad's a doctor. Uncle's a doctor. Your older brother's a doctor. You should be a doctor. Doctors are this high profession. We grow up maybe where even they're talking about, those low-level people who are clerks. Fortunately for you, you're going to be a doctor. It begins very young, but it doesn't let up. The rich ones, the poor ones, the successful ones, the not successful ones. And so what we do has become this box of who we are, which creates an incredible amount of stress. Because you better figure it out. And not only better figure it out, it better be good. It better make you a lot of money. It better be socially acceptable. It better be something that when your parents go to parties, they can hold their head up and say, my son is this. It now has all this baggage with it. You're no longer expected to simply do your duty, fulfill your role. You are now responsible for how comfortable or uncomfortable your parents feel at parties, for how your spouse or children feel about themselves in society. Do they have the expensive shoes that all their friends have because their dad has the money to buy it? Or do they not have the expensive shoes their friends have because their dad doesn't have the money to buy it? And so you start to see where that stress is very obvious. Now, here's the solution. We cannot go backwards in our culture. There's no point even thinking about, rewinding the clock. But we do have options. We do have options about how much we buy into. We do have options about how much we allow other people's sickness to infect us. I mean, if other people want to identify themselves as their titles and their careers and their bank balances and the size of their waist and the type of jewelry they're wearing, no problem, it's a free world. But that doesn't mean that we have to. What we know is that all of the suffering in the world, this is one of the core teachings of the spiritual tradition, is that the suffering in the world comes from that false identification with the body. And this is written thousands of years ago, which is how we know it's not just a common phenomenon. I just think it's gotten a lot worse. The suffering, the ego, the anger, the unfulfilled expectations, the grudges, the depression, it stems from this false identification with the body that says, I am this being, I am what it looks like, how beautiful or ugly it is by societal standards today, in this particular society. I am how much money somebody is prepared to pay it to do something. I am all of these things. I am what's happened to it. I am what it does, what type of uniform it wears every day, where it goes to punch a time clock. I am those things. And in our scriptures and our sages and our saints remind us all the time, this is the root of suffering. Because when the stock market crashes, or when you've got an acne breakout on your face, or when you got fired from your job and downsizing, or when the relationships that you identified as who I am, I'm so-and-so's wife, well, when so-and-so divorces me or dies, it all starts to fall apart. I'm so-and-so's mother. I am a mother. That's who I am. Well, when my kids grow up and move out of the house and no longer need me, I not only have an empty nest, I have an empty heart. And so this is where they've said this is the cause of suffering. Doesn't mean don't do those things. By all means, do them, no problem. I mean, you can't do all of them, of course, but pick and choose. But realize it's what you're doing, it's not who you are. The jobs that we have fulfill a wide variety of criteria. For some people, that job is their calling. Occasionally, it's rare, but it happens. There are people who have always wanted to be actors or singers or dancers, and they become famous and they are able to make a living performing on Broadway or in Bollywood or Hollywood. There are people who all they've wanted to do their whole life is be a fireman. And they grow up and they become a fireman. And nothing else matters because that's all they've wanted to do. That is who they are. Great. But it's very rare. Most people, the jobs they do are things that they do because it's a way to put food on the table. There's very few people who would get up every day and go to work if they weren't being paid to do so. That's what we call seva. That's the spiritual work. But there's very few people in the workforce who, if their bosses said, you know, I'd like you to keep coming in every day, but unfortunately I'm no longer going to be able to pay you. There's not very many people who would continue to show up every day. We do it to make a living. And I mention this very specifically because that means it doesn't necessarily have to be your calling. Your calling could be to be a musician, to be an artist, but you're not one of those who's able at this point to make a living in Bollywood, in Hollywood, on Broadway. So you become a waiter. So you can work nights and go on auditions in the daytime. Well, clearly being a waiter isn't your calling. But it's what you do so that you can eat while fulfilling something else. My favorite example of this is you see these people on the sides of the road cutting rocks to become the gravel. They're literally hammering piles of big rocks into medium into small. Well, clearly, that's not their calling. Clearly, they were not put on earth to be rock hammerers. And yet, that's what they need to do to put food on the table. And through doing so, maybe one of them, this is the way I think of it, maybe through one of these people rock hammering, day in and day out, he's bringing in enough money to keep his daughter in school. And maybe his daughter becomes the very first girl in their whole slum to go to school and to stay in school. And maybe by her going to school, the other girls in the slum are inspired and they say to their parents, let us go. And so maybe he's actually a revolutionary without even thinking about it. Maybe long after he's passed away, his slum becomes world-renowned for being a slum in which girls actually go to school instead of pick through trash. He wasn't planning on starting a revolution. He was just a man with a great heart who didn't discriminate between his boy and his girl, his son and his daughter. And just as he wanted his son to get an education so he didn't have to hammer rocks, so he wanted his daughter to get one. And so we can look at this and we can understand, that was his purpose actually. But he may not have even known it. In his whole life, he may not have known it. And the truth is, he didn't have to know it. All he had to do was put one foot in front of the other each day, doing what his inner voice said. This is what you are meant to do. And whatever it was that was going to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads, he knew he had to do it. And I mention this because if you can shift what to do from which is going to be my calling, how can I find a job that's going to pay the rent and is what I'm put on earth to do? If you can shift that focus and kind of widen it to realize, well, actually, during my life and even during the course of one day, I can do so many things. I can have a job. I can have hobbies. I can have a spiritual practice. I can do seva. And so that which puts the food on the table doesn't have to be my calling. Choose something. Put one foot in front of the other. Allow yourself to walk through that door, and then as other doors open, this is how the world works. You walk through one door, and as you walk, suddenly other doors start opening, and you realize from inside it says, turn here. I thought I was going down this road, but as I got to this door, I felt such a strong pull this way. Then you walk down that way. And then as you walk, maybe another door opens. Here. But sitting and being stressed and trying to figure it out in your mind is almost never the answer. Yes, you have to plan. Okay, here are my expenses. It means I've got to get a job that makes this much. But then you just start moving. You can overthink everything. You can overthink yourself into paralysis. Literally. You can get to a point where you do nothing. Simply because you can't figure out what to do. So there comes a time when we have to literally just give the mind a rest. Choose something, listen to the heart, move forward with it, but move forward with it with an open heart, so that maybe it was only meant to take you a certain way. And then another door opened. And then another door opened. And then another door opened. And this is how you move through life.